Welcome to the Night Tube. I'm Stephen Knight, and I'm going to be speaking a little bit about non-Islamic terror attacks. They're usually dubbed far-right terror attacks in the mainstream media. There's some good arguments as to why Islamic terror attacks should probably be considered far-right, but that's the language our mainstream media uses to differentiate Islamic terror attacks from non-Islamic terror attacks. And we have just seen one of the worst non-Islamic terror attacks imaginable, a white supremacist terror attack on worshipping Muslims in New Zealand, Christchurch. Over 50 killed during Friday prayers, and as far as terror attacks go, it doesn't get much worse than that. And it's kind of interesting to see in the aftermath of this atrocity, those who are trying to engage in sincere analysis and trying to address the underpinning ideology, in this case white supremacism, versus those who are just using this atrocity to score political points or to get one over on people they just don't like. So that very swiftly brings me to Mehdi Hasan. Now, Mehdi is a British journalist and happens to be a Muslim. Spends a lot of his time railing against the injustices carried out by the West, whilst also simultaneously getting a paycheck from Qatari-funded Al Jazeera. Qatar is a country under Sharia law. They still think that flogging and stoning are perfectly legal punishments. I think Mehdi was caught on film quite a while back referring to non-believers as cattle. I think he made a comparison between gay people and paedophiles. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to play the clip. I suppose if you close your eyes and listen to this, you can almost see the fucking hook and backpack full of Semtex.
If we know anything of Shia of Muhammad, as Shia of Ali, as Shia of Hassan, as Shia of Hussein, we know that keeping the moral high ground is key. Once we lose the moral high ground, we are no different from the rest of the non-Muslims, from the rest of those human beings who live their lives as animals, bending any rule to fulfill any desire.
What is kafir? Kafir comes from the root word, which means to cover up, to conceal. The kafir is the one who covers up that knowledge which is clear. The French Orientalist scholar Lamens, he once wrote that the Quran is not far from considering unbelief, disbelief, as an infirmity, as an illness, as a disease of the human mind. Subhanallah. Non-Muslims point this out to us. And of course the kafir, the disbelievers, the atheists who remain deaf and stubborn to the teachings of Islam, the rational message of the Quran, they are described in the Quran as, quote, a people of no intelligence. Allah describes them. Not of no morality, not of no belief, a people of no intelligence. In this respect, the Quran describes the atheists as cattle, as those who go with the crowd.
These ulama unanimously agree that at the very minimum, if Yazid was not a kafir, then at the very minimum, he was a fasir, a transgressor, a breaker of Islamic laws, a corrupt individual, a tyrant, a killer, a drunkard, a dog lover, a music lover, a homosexual, a paedophile, a sexual deviant, someone who slept with his own mother, astaghfirullah. These are their views of these ulama in their books, not my view.
Immediately after this terror atrocity, Mehdi was on hand to make some comments live on MSNBC.
The white shooter, mass shooter, is always, was he mentally ill?
Right.
Deranged, loner, lone wolf. The Muslim killer is always a terrorist fueled by ideology. I always say, if you believe the view of Muslims presented by some in the media, we're immune to mental illness. It's kind of cool. Right. We have some inbuilt immunity. We can't be mentally ill. Right. We're just kind of ideologues. But if you look at the coverage, Joy, the word terrorism is not used for people who are not Muslims. That's the problem. We've been conditioned to believe that a terrorist attack is only an attack carried out by a brown dude with a beard shouting something in Arabic.
First of all, Mehdi makes the claim that the label terrorist is not applied to non-white, non-Muslim perpetrators of terror, which is simply not true. If there's a political motive involved, they are labelled a terrorist, as was this individual in the Christchurch attack. The mainstream news media outlets all refer to this as a terrorist incident. They all refer to the attacker as a terrorist. The Prime Minister of New Zealand, in fact, said that this was a terror attack almost immediately after the attack.
It is clear that this can now only be described as a terrorist attack.
Mehdi also appears to be making the claim that non-white Islamic terror attacks never get excused under the guise of mental health, which is simply not true, as these following cases from recent memory will attest. Special honourable mention to Robin Simcox, who compiled the bulk of these examples via his Twitter feed. I'll put a link to that in the video description. In December 2014, a driver shouting Allahu Akbar, the Arabic for God is greatest, ran down 11 pedestrians in Dijon, France. The prosecutor in the case stated that the attacker had a long history of mental illness and the incident was not linked to terrorism. In 2015, Alan Rizvanovic drove his vehicle through Graz, Austria, killing 3 people and injuring 36 others. He now resides in a psychiatric ward rather than a prison after being assessed and reported to be mentally ill. In February 2016, Russian nanny Gyulchera Bobakalova decapitated the child she was supposed to be looking after, parading the severed head around Moscow while shouting Allahu Akbar. She did not face trial for murder or terrorism, as she was reported to be insane. In March 2016, Mehdi Hasan Ali stabbed 2 soldiers in Canada. He was acquitted of terrorism charges due to being reported as suffering from schizophrenia. In May 2016, a man yelling Allahu Akbar killed 1 person and wounded 3 others in a knife attack in Munich, Germany. He was reported as having a mental illness and placed in a psychiatric ward. In July 2016, 15 people were injured in a suicide bombing outside a wine bar in Germany. The perpetrator, Syrian refugee Mohammed Dalil, had pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. It was widely reported that he had previously been under psychiatric care and diagnosed with mental health issues. In August 2016, an attacker shouted Allahu Akbar while stabbing a rabbi in Strasbourg, France. The attacker was assessed to be, and reported as, mentally ill. In August 2016, a Norwegian Somali stabbed several people in Russell Square, London, UK. 1 person was killed. It was reported widely in the press as a mental health issue. In October 2016, a woman in a burqa attacked police with a knife in Germany while shouting, you guessed it, Allahu Akbar. It was later reported that she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital. In December 2017, a Syrian asylum seeker stabbed multiple people in Berlin. He was reported in the press to be mentally unstable. Also in December 2017, Saeed Nouri used his car to run down pedestrians in Melbourne, Australia. 1 person was killed and 17 others were injured. Nouri himself stated that his actions were a response to the way Muslim people are treated. However, he was widely reported to have had a history of drug use and mental health issues and was not convicted of any terrorism charges. In May 2018, a Syrian asylum seeker stabbed 3 people in The Hague while shouting Allahu Akbar. He was reported to have had mental health issues in the media. In June 2018, a Syrian refugee stabbed police in Holland while shouting Allahu Akbar. The mayor described it as a psychotic attack. In September 2018, an Afghan asylum seeker stabbed 3 people in Germany. He was sent to a psychiatric ward, not prison. In December 2018, an asylum seeker from Kosovo injured 9 people with an axe in Dusseldorf. He was described in the media as having a history of mental illness and was placed in a psychiatric ward. In January 2019, a man stabbed several people at Manchester's Victoria Station in the UK. He was heard shouting about Allah and the Caliphate as he was arrested. Although still facing potential terrorism charges, it was reported at the time that he was detained under the Mental Health Act. So hopefully it should be clear by now that the mental health component, if it exists, is never absent from reporting on attacks carried out when the perpetrators are non-white or Muslim. And in fact, there's actually plenty of far-right conspiracy theories that suggest that the media are somehow committed to the idea of wishing away or whitewashing away Islamic terror attacks under the guise of mental health. So Mehdi is just simply the opposite extreme of that conspiracy theory. We must be honest about the ideological underpinnings of terror attacks, whether it's white supremacy, whether it's Islamism, and we also mustn't rule out additional causes and components such as mental health. Misrepresenting how we report these attacks and making excuses for the underlying ideology, as Mehdi appears committed to doing, only muddies the water and makes it difficult to have a more open conversation about these things, whether it be inspired by white supremacy, whether it be inspired by Islamism, and whether or not there is a mental health factor. So beware of analysis from people like Mehdi, who will use an atrocity to settle personal or political scores. They are not sincere individuals. I'm not entirely convinced they care about the victims, and they deserve to be thoroughly ignored and shunned. Thank you for listening. Make sure you hit like, make sure you hit share, and make sure you subscribe.